She said she was a community leader. She said she was clean, loyal, and honest. She said she loved her boyfriend. But behind closed doors, she was doing drugs, cheating on him, and planning to climb her way to political power. So I made a plan. And in just 10 seconds, I ruined everything she built, in front of a live audience. Here's how it happened. My mother passed away while giving birth to me, so I never had the chance to meet her. I have only seen her in photos, and in those, she looked beautiful. My father always told me she was a wonderful person, and I have no reason to doubt that. He did a great job raising me on his own, though he had my aunt's help until I turned 11. My aunt had her own kids, a bit older than me, but we all got along like siblings while growing up. We are still close even now, and that includes my aunt herself. Just like my mom, she has always been kind and caring. My dad worked incredibly long hours to keep everything going. He owned a small convenience store, where he did most of the work himself, managing, working the register, you name it. He had one person helping him out, but he carried most of the weight. Even as a little kid, I would pitch in after school, doing simple tasks like sweeping the floor and restocking shelves. For a long time, my dad's helper was a Chinese man, but he eventually had to leave to take care of his elderly parents back in China. After that, my dad brought in a white guy, who did a decent job, but he ended up finishing college and moving on. Eventually, my dad hired a Chinese woman to work with him, and she would later become his second wife and my stepmother. Let us call her Barbara, even though that is not her real name. Barbara was only about 15 years older than I was. She was around 26, and my dad was already 44, so there was a noticeable age gap between them. One issue in the beginning was that she did not speak the same dialect of Chinese, which made things tricky at our store. We lived in a predominantly Chinese neighborhood, where almost all of our customers spoke Mandarin. Occasionally, a white or black customer would show up, but Barbara's English did not really give us an advantage. At first, Barbara treated me well, and I figured she must be a nice person. I was not even 12 yet when she and my father got married and she moved into our house. From what I gathered, her family back in China had a lot of money. They paid for an elegant wedding and flew over to America for the ceremony. But my dad was never the kind of man who let anyone cover his expenses. He kept pushing himself to work every single day like a machine. After they got married, Barbara's attitude toward me started to change. She stopped acting like the friendly older sister she pretended to be while dating my dad. She no longer treated me like an equal. Instead, she became very strict and tried to control every little thing. She would not let me help out at the shop anymore. It was not exactly like one of those fairy tales where the stepmother forces the child to do chores all day, but she definitely kept me distant from my father. Over the next several years, she convinced him to sponsor a steady stream of her friends and relatives from China so they could come live in the United States. Even though my dad did not have a lot of money, he was smart with business. He helped these new arrivals set up small ventures, little restaurants, dry cleaners, phone repair stores, pretty much all the kinds of businesses you see in strip malls or on busy corners in smaller towns. My father was the one making those opportunities happen, even though the people running the shops were all Chinese families. When I was 17, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. He had been smoking since he was 13, and it finally caught up with him. He passed away 2 years later, at the age of 52. When I was a kid, I always thought one day I would take over my father's convenience store after he retired. That dream stayed with me for a long time. By the time I turned 19, I was still too young to legally sell alcohol, but I assumed Barbara would let me help run the place now that my dad had passed away. I was wrong. Instead of giving me a chance, she handed the store over to one of her adult cousins. He brought in only his own relatives and friends to work there. Just like that, the business my father built from the ground up was completely out of my life. Before my dad died, Barbara convinced him to revise his will so that almost all of his savings went to her. He was not a millionaire or anything, but he had saved up hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. I did not care much about the money itself, she could have it, but it still felt wrong. Her family already had plenty, and she walked away with everything. I have always suspected that she married my dad just to bring her people over from China. Maybe I am wrong, but that is the feeling I get. Either way, no amount of money could ever replace my father. I would trade every penny just to have him back, but I guess that is just wishful thinking. To be fair, he did leave behind a small trust fund for me. It was enough to pay my way through a few years of junior college. But as soon as I turned 18, Barbara kicked me out of the house my dad worked his entire life to buy. She told me straight to my face, "This is not your home. Time for you to go. Bye-bye." Since she was his wife, she legally owned everything. And with him gone, she wasted no time moving her new boyfriend into the house. He was a loud, obnoxious guy from Taiwan, a real slob, and from what I heard, he used to be some big deal in the mob over there. But here in the States, he did nothing but lounge around all day playing mahjong and living off Barbara's money in my father's house. Honestly, I think he was just hiding out in America, probably trying to avoid trouble with other criminals back in Asia. As for Barbara, I have a strong feeling she hooked up with him because he had some shady connections in both China and Taiwan. I would not be surprised if she was involved in some sort of fraud, but I cannot prove it. Before she threw me out, I noticed Barbara had started using my father's money to buy up some apartment buildings. Later on, I heard whispers that she was renting rooms to human traffickers and that the buildings were basically fronts for brothels. That information came to me later, along with the news that she was making serious profits from both the rent and the cut she was getting from those operations. I have to admit, Barbara is a very attractive woman physically. It is easy to see why my dad fell for her. But to me, thinking of her as my stepmother, she means absolutely nothing. She was the kind of woman who could easily manipulate men because of her looks. And I am almost certain she used more than her appearance to get what she wanted. I cannot say for sure in most cases, except for one major incident, but I will come back to that in a moment. After she forced me out, I moved in with my kind-hearted aunt. She took me in while I attended college, studying for a degree in computer engineering. The money from my small inheritance covered a couple of years of tuition. My aunt never asked me to pay rent. She was already busy raising her own children. One of her sons was already married and living on his own, but she still had 3 daughters at home who were not yet married. Her husband had passed away years earlier, so I stepped in as the man of the house. I took care of things like yard work, fixed the cars, and helped out with any computer issues that came up while I lived there. Eventually, I lost all contact with Barbara. I accepted that she had won and moved on. Around that time, I also landed a job at a local computer hobby shop, where I specialized in upgrading and customizing machines to make them run faster. Working at the computer hobby shop turned out to be a really solid experience. The pay was not amazing, but it was something, and I felt like I was finally starting to carve out a name for myself, at least locally. Our city was small. I mean really small. And even within that small community, the Chinese families mostly stuck together in one particular part of town. Everyone seemed to know everyone. After a while, I met a girl, her name was Kay. She was around my age and studying to become a nurse. We started dating, and things were going well. A few months in, she began introducing me to her family. Kay already knew that I lived with my aunt and that my stepmother, Barbara, had kicked me out of my father's house. But I had never actually mentioned Barbara's real name. So we're hanging out at Kay's place one day, and I meet her older brother, Mike. He's about 26. Like the rest of us, Mike is Chinese, but he stands out. His arms are covered in tattoos, and he has a tough guy aura. Turns out, he used to be in a gang when he was younger, got locked up for a while, and spent several years in prison. These days, he works for a landscaping company, mowing lawns, trimming trees, that kind of thing. In our part of town, guys like Mike are what we call cowboys. I do not know if that word means quite the same thing in English, but it is the closest way I can describe it. Anyway, I had seen Mike around Kay's house a few times, and one day, he happened to overhear me when Kay asked me something about my stepmother. I slipped up and said Barbara's real name out loud. Mike paused and looked at me. "Wait, did you just say Barbara?" Then he turned to his sister and said, "Excuse me, May, did he say that Barbara?" Everyone around here calls their younger sisters May. It is just a thing. I nodded. Yeah. That's my stepmom. Mike looked right at me and said, "No offense, man, but I'm ing your stepmom." I was stunned. Apparently, Mike had a reputation for getting around. He had stories about all kinds of women, not just in our neighborhood, but outside of it too. White women, black women, Mexican women, you name it. And now, it turned out, he had added my stepmother to the list. I had not given much thought to Barbara in a while. She was more like a shadow from my past than anything else. But hearing what she had been up to lately definitely caught my attention. Especially since she was now sleeping with my girlfriend's brother. Mike went on to say that Barbara had turned the apartment building she owned into a full-on cat house. Pimps were running operations out of the place, and prostitutes were constantly coming and going. Barbara never outright told him that, of course, but Mike said he figured it out himself. According to him, he was like an Asian streetwise Sherlock Holmes. He also mentioned that a lot of guys he met in prison ended up there because of setups like that. Then he dropped another bomb: Barbara was running for city council. She was using the image of being a hard-working, self-made woman of color to gain sympathy and attention, and maybe even votes. It was obvious she was trying to build her own little empire. Kay looked at her brother and asked if he would be willing to help us take her down, legally. Barbara had been clever. She structured things in a way that made it difficult to prove she actually knew what was going on inside her buildings. But even if we could not prove it in court, if we got the authorities to shut the buildings down, it would cut off her cash flow. That alone would be a major win, and it might even stop some of the exploitation going on there. At first, Mike admitted he would have stayed quiet. Barbara had been giving him money, and as long as he was sleeping with her, she kept the cash coming. But now that his little sister, his May, was asking him to do the right thing, he was willing to walk away from the money. I offered to pay Mike for his help, even though I knew I could not match the kind of money Barbara was throwing at him. But he just shook his head and said, "You do not need to pay me a thing. But if you hurt my little sister, I will cut your balls off." Fair deal. So we came up with a plan. Mike would secretly record a video at Barbara's apartment during one of their encounters. The idea was to catch her on camera doing something illegal, ideally involving drugs, and tie it to her real identity. Basically, it would be a hidden camera setup, with his phone tucked somewhere out of sight in her bedroom. Mike had no problem with any of this. He said he did not care about his reputation in the US anyway. His plan was to leave the country soon and head back to China, where his father had a business lined up for him. He was not the least bit concerned about being in an amateur adult video. He had spent time in prison. He had been part of a gang. None of this fazed him. Plus, Barbara and Mike already used drugs together regularly at her place. On the day he recorded the video, he made sure to show Barbara using the drugs on camera. He played it smart. The footage made it look like she was the one who had the drugs, that she had offered them to him. He barely appeared on screen and kept his role as minimal as possible. On my advice, he also got her to say certain things naturally during their conversation. He had her mention the current day and year, confirm that the apartment belonged to her late husband, and say that her new boyfriend was out playing mahjong at a friend's house. Then, for extra flair, and this part was entirely Mike's idea, he coaxed Barbara, in the heat of the moment, into trash-talking her current Taiwanese boyfriend. She called him a coward, a weak man, and said Mike was the only one who could truly satisfy her. It was intense. And honestly kind of disturbing, but also darkly hilarious. The entire recording was in Chinese, which was fine, since we were targeting a Chinese-speaking audience. The most important thing was that her face was clearly visible on camera. The video was not professional in any sense, which, thankfully, meant there were no crystal-clear shots of anyone's private parts. Still, the context was obvious. The original video was about 20 minutes long. But we trimmed it down, cutting out the unnecessary sex scenes. Those were not the focus. When I say we, I mean Mike and I. Kay absolutely wanted no part of editing a video that featured her own brother. I could not blame her. I did not really want to see Barbara either, but at least I did not have to see anything too graphic. We kept the segments that mattered most: Barbara's face, her doing and offering drugs, her voice mentioning the date and the house, a few seconds of clear sexual activity to show context, and the part where she made fun of her boyfriend. The final clip came out to just under 10 seconds. That was all we needed. A few days later, Mike flew to China to meet up with his family. About a week after that, Barbara was scheduled to give a speech. City council candidates often have to appear in public, and this was her turn. Most people do not care about city council events. The only folks who show up are a handful of other politicians and a small crowd of bored locals. I started digging into Barbara's background and, not surprisingly, she was out there promoting herself as some kind of saint. She claimed to be a community leader, a successful businesswoman who had helped immigrants open over a dozen businesses in the area. Total nonsense. She was taking credit for work my dad had done. Classic Barbara move. But anyway, let's talk about those city council events. They are usually boring enough to put anyone to sleep. Nothing but long-winded speeches that nobody listens to, unless something outrageous happens. Like a politician saying something Hitler might have said. Or someone getting assassinated. Or, one of the candidates turning out to be in an amateur adult film. Live. In front of everyone. Now that gets people talking. So the big day arrived. Barbara was giving a speech at a local hotel conference room. Maybe 100 people showed up. The public had been invited. And yep, her boyfriend, the so-called Mahjong King, was there, sitting front and center. So were all her cousins, the ones my dad had helped immigrate and set up in business. They had no idea what was coming. I sat up front too, wearing a dark beanie and sunglasses, backpack at my feet. No one paid any attention to me. The lights in the room were dimmed for the speakers, and everyone's eyes were on the stage. Barbara was the fourth speaker out of 6. While the first guy droned on about zoning laws or something equally soul-crushing, I casually reached into my bag, pulled out a bazooka Bluetooth speaker, about 20 inches tall, built like a cannon, and slid it right up near the stage. I had tested it the night before. It was more than loud enough. The first 3 speakers were painfully dull. Sitting through them was like watching paint dry while someone played Jessica Simpson attempting to freestyle in the background. But I waited. Patiently. Then, finally, Barbara stepped up to the mic. She started rambling about being a model citizen and a loving family woman. That was my cue. I pulled out my phone and used a projector app one had rigged up at work. I had also built a small custom projection box, just big enough to create a crisp image on the wall behind her. It worked like a charm. Suddenly, a 10-second clip lit up the wall, Barbara's face, clear as day, talking about the date, gushing about ecstasy, calling her boyfriend a useless loser, and screaming for Mike to keep going. Loud and clear. Thanks to the bazooka speaker, every moan echoed like a church bell. The room froze. It was dead silent for a moment, just shock. Then I hit repeat and played the clip again. Still no one moved. Barbara was standing on stage, frozen, mouth open, eyes wide like a deer in headlights. Then someone in the audience shouted in Chinese, "That's Mike." And the crowd erupted. Everyone knew Mike. Especially the women. As the room turned into a frenzy, I calmly grabbed my speaker and projector, packed them into my bag, and slipped out the side door. Kay was waiting outside with the car running. Before leaving, I looked back one last time, raised my voice, and said, "This is not your place, Barbara. Time to go. But bye." Then we were gone. Back at Kay's place, we were practically bursting with relief and joy. We got engaged that night. By the weekend, I was packed and moving into her uncle's house, which was conveniently near my new university. I went back to finish my degree. Kay became a full-time registered nurse. She is the one bringing in most of the money for now, but I will catch up soon. I plan to pull my weight, and then some. According to my aunt, Barbara's relationship completely collapsed. And when I say collapsed, I mean she fled the city. Her boyfriend apparently lost it and threatened to kill her. Her campaign ended in flames. She lost the election, big surprise. An anonymous tip had reached the press, and the damage was done. And to top it off, her whole bordello apartment operation shut down. Poetic justice, if you ask me. Barbara's little scandal did more than just wreck her reputation. The fallout hit her entire circle. A bunch of her relatives, most of them running businesses my dad helped them start, started losing customers fast. A couple of them already shut down completely. The rest are barely hanging on. As for my dad's old house, it ended up in foreclosure. Some white family moved in. They are literally the only white folks on that block now. I wish them luck, may the round eyes hold strong. Barbara's, let's just say highlight reel, yeah, that gif, circulated all over Facebook. Tons of people shared it before it got flagged and pulled for violating community standards. But not before it did the damage. Mike blasted the teaser out to just about everyone he knew, and in our neighborhood, that means the entire world. Since the clip was short, people were reposting it on Instagram too, over and over, before it got wiped off there as well. But it was enough. Barbara's whole life went up in smoke. Now, the full-length version. That one made it to a few pay-to-play adult sites. It never made it to the free ones, though, at least not yet. Mike says he's keeping tabs, always looking for a way to squeeze some cash out of it. Classy, right? Anyway, looking back, I guess I did not inherit much from my dad, not money or property, but he left me something better. He taught me to stand tall, to never let myself get pushed around. That was the best gift he could have given me. See you in heaven, Dad. Unless all this nonsense booked me a one-way ticket somewhere warmer. With love. Op.